we are live.
Hello, good morning. My name is Martha O'Rourke. Welcome to Beyond the Stars. My guest today is Brian Tseng, SolarBee, which we'll be asking why you're called SolarBee as well, because, you know, you've got a nickname on the side for a reason. So welcome, Brian. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, Marantha. I love being on shows as a guest, especially for the first time. It's that much more fun.
It is, because there'll be things that you haven't discussed maybe in other topics and things. You get a chance when it's a new one to bring in things that maybe people have not heard before, maybe the very first time that people even heard the word disclosure. So welcome everybody and thank you for coming. Please share us out and all that stuff that goes with that idea. So this is Brian's platform today, basically. I'm just holding a space for him. So Brian, feel free to start anywhere you like. Probably the first thing would be really good is to let people know, who are you? What is the
Yeah.
disclosure movement and things like that? Because there will be viewers that'll watch the replay that have no idea what this is. And it is a very vast subject. When people think disclosure, they think maybe just UFOs and little things like that, but it goes a lot further, correct? So if you'd like to just let us know, that'd be great.
Yeah, thank you so much, Marantha. I guess the nickel version for my origin story would
Mhm.
be I'm ABC, American-born Chinese.
Yep.
At the end of, post World War II era, my father's family went from China to Taiwan to New York City. And my
Mhm.
mother's side went from China to Hong Kong to New York City. And then that's where
Right.
my mother and
Wow.
father ended up meeting. And,
Yep.
they got married. And from New York City, they went to the Pennsylvania, New Jersey areas. And so I was raised on the East Coast there.
Mhm.
And my father started a company out of our basement in
Yep.
Newtown, Pennsylvania, called Tseng Labs Inc. And during the 80s and early 90s, he revolutionized a lot of the computer graphics side of things with IBM the
Yep.
compatibles. Because like you had
Okay.
Apple, a lot of our older viewers will remember Apple was like
Yep.
all ahead of things with like audio and video. And so if you were a filmmaker or making, you're a graphic artist, you're probably on an Apple. And then if you
Yeah, for
wanted to do
sure.
like spreadsheets and word
Yeah.
processing and all that, generally you're probably on IBM because they weren't as
Mhm.
sophisticated and integrated. And so
Mhm.
his success, it really opened my eyes. It's like, wow, you can influence the world from our basement,
Yeah,
starting
like,
out, and
amazing.
it
Yeah.
afforded me an amazing education.
Yep.
I got my biochemistry degree from Occidental College, just a bachelor's.
Mhm.
But with
Yep.
that, I got to, in addition to getting to travel with a family, go to Australia, among other places.
Oh, you've been
Um,
to Australia? Yeah,
yeah, it
okay.
was a 6-week cultural exchange the summer after I graduated high school, and right before I was
Nice.
going to go to Occidental College in Los Angeles,
Mhm.
I'd asked them for this, and it was an amazing gift,
Yeah,
and,
well,
yeah, real eye opener too.
bit of
It's
a
like a
culture
different.
shock to come here. It's a totally different world to the rest of the world, really,
Well,
you know?
you know what it was is, I was letting people know that I was about to go to college in Los Angeles, and this is when
Mhm.
Beverly Hills 90210, the TV
Right.
series, was a really
Yeah,
big thing, and
it
so in
was, yeah.
Oz, all the Australian kids were like, "Oh, mate, that's so cool, like, that's so Beverly Hills 90210," and then I get
Yeah.
to Occidental College, and it turned out that they were filming the college years at
Oh,
that
were
at
they?
on my
Oh,
campus,
right,
yeah,
okay.
because
Yeah,
Occidental is
wow.
it's in LA, and it's a
Yeah.
uh very beautiful
Yeah,
campus,
quite,
so it looks great
yeah,
on
is it?
film.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah, okay.
and so but then I got to see the reality of like, wow, here are these fellow teenagers in Oz who were, like, so wowed by this. I get there,
Mm.
you had the Rodney King riots right that summer, so I'm like, "Whoa, what
Oh,
am I getting into here in Los Angeles?"
yeah,
Like,
goodness,
they're
yeah.
rioting in this city.
Yeah, that
I'm
was
like,
pretty big. I remember
yeah,
that. Mm,
it's a big deal, 1993,
yeah, yeah.
and, what was it? I'm, like, looking at these actors and actresses who are portrayed as these, like, fresh young college kids, just coming out of high school, and, like, some of these actors and actresses, they're, like, 30s and 40
Yeah,
years
that's
old.
right.
Like,
Exactly.
Andrea
They've all
was, like,
been
40
through,
years old, right?
goodness,
It was
okay.
wild,
Yeah, yeah.
and so, and you just get to see the fakeness of the set. I also got to get, the autograph, I have it right here, but on my bookshelf
Oh,
behind
dear.
me,
Yep.
from, Shannon Doherty. She passed
Oh,
away,
wow.
sadly,
Yeah,
but
poor thing, I
that's really
remember that.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Um, but needless to say, I got my biochemistry degree, and I was gonna go into I thought that maybe I would, like, learn how to genetically modify slime mold to clean up oil spills, okay?
Mhm.
Something like
Right.
that, and,
Yep, yep.
I get out into the field just, like, really young and low basic entry level bottle
Yep,
washer in some of these
yep.
biotech companies and saw, like, no, they're just not trying to help the world. They just wanna do the next, like, shaky leg syndrome drug they can make a lot of money on for the next 17
Really?
years until the patent runs out. And so,
Wow.
instead, I moved from LA up to the San Francisco Bay Area, and I became a medical organizer and advocate, working within
Mhm.
a private association of doctors on an all-volunteer basis, to
Right.
fight medical denials and,
Wow,
when
okay.
their patients care, keep them in practice,
Yes.
organize more physicians together with the nurses and other healthcare workers
Mhm.
and the people in the community, the business owners, the
Yep.
families of the patients and the patients themselves, who like,
Mhm.
wow, that hospital saved my life. We want to keep them open. When, say,
Yeah,
a nonprofit hospital corporation, in our case, Sutter Health,
yeah.
in San Francisco, Northern California Bay Area at the time, they were using their nonprofit status to gobble up all the other hospitals in the region for like
Wow.
on
Okay.
a pennies on the dollar after bankrupting them with their practices of dumping the poor onto the street, so they all end up on the
Yes.
county and charity
Mm.
hospitals. The
Yep.
charity hospitals go belly up. They swim, they grab them up and say, "We're gonna keep it open and do all the
Mhm.
care," and everyone's like, "Yay." And then they,
Yeah.
like, out of
No.
after 3 years in a 10-year journey, we're supposed to keep it open for 10 years. 3 years later, like, "Oh, it's losing too much money. We have to shut it down."
Dear God. See, the things you don't know, right?
Right,
Unless
and the
you're
way we
in the middle of it. Yeah.
it's
Mm.
I could go on
Wow.
for and I don't wanna
Yeah.
bore our viewership because 'cause I'd rather
No,
talk
no,
about
no.
secret space
Yeah, that's
programs, but
okay. Yeah, yeah.
but 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 the part of why I'm talking about this is w how do you fight multi-billion-dollar corporations or bad government policies or rogue agencies on an
Correct.
all-volunteer shoestring budget,
Mhm.
that says
Mhm.
"of the people, by the people, for the
Mhm.
people," and to make this a
Correct.
better country and world?
Exactly, yeah.
And, yeah, a lot of people are like, "That sounds
It is an
terrible."
impossible task, yeah.
Yeah. So, we made an analysis of this multi-billion dollar nonprofit corporation, and we said, instead of just holding up signs and protesting them as they're gonna shut down hospital by hospital by hospital, why don't we
Yeah.
challenge their nonprofit status in the first place? And how do we
Right.
do that? We put pressure on the politicians and the people
Mhm.
who are the supposed decision makers, granting them their billions of dollars it adds up to of nonprofit
Yeah.
status at the local,
Right.
state, and federal level, and organize
Yep.
the physicians behind the ethical practice of medicine with the other medical staff, the business owners who wanna keep the local hospital open, and on and on and on. And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden, you get these politicians going, "We're gonna investigate Sutter's nonprofit status." We got at the
Mhm.
local county of San
Yep.
Francisco level, city and county, and then
Yep.
up at the, we're starting to get at the regional level over in, Berkeley as well, and then
Mhm.
at the state level, and then
Yep.
we didn't have to get to the federal level because they said, "Oh, we're gonna keep St. Luke's Hospital open. We're gonna keep this other facility open. We wouldn't shut it down." And
Okay, so they're saving face, of course, which saves
well,
the
not
money. Yeah.
it saves a face, but it shows you that before it was an impossible situation. At the
It
start of
it
it, it's
seemed that
like,
way, yeah. Yeah.
patients and doctors, how are we gonna fight this multi-billion dollar corporation? Oh my god, they're gonna shut down our hospital. We're
Yeah.
screwed,
Yeah, that's right.
okay?
Yeah.
Now later on, those same hospitals began being centers where people would go and roll up their sleeves, and that's when I
Yeah.
got burnt. I really, but from 2003 to 2011, I was an organizer advocate in the medical field,
Okay.
okay? And I
That
got to
would have been a
study.
was that a fairly stressful job? Because, you've got a lot of pressure on you to get things fairly right for the
Well,
people base.
it was all volunteer, and for 5 of those
Okay.
8 years, I
Yep.
was full-time, 7 days a week, but
Holy
I
cow.
was I was serious, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And
Well,
then
it is a serious position for the people because 'cause they're the ones that are feeling the pinch, you know what I mean? They're the ones that are getting
yeah,
hurt, so yeah.
yeah, and then 3 years, I was like, "Okay, part-time," because of
Yep.
stress, and that just you can't go 5 years full-time, I mean,
Mm-mm.
go keep longer
No,
than
no.
that, I couldn't.
Yeah.
Um, some people can though, and I'm amazed at them, they're amazing.
Yeah.
So I don't wanna don't let I'm not don't forget about them,
Yeah, yeah.
and props to them.
Yep.
But, uh, I was then after 3 years part-time, I was kinda burnt out for a while, and
Yeah.
then I this is where I get my nickname, Brian the SolarBee, is I
Oh,
went from
okay.
Brian the Bee, because B is, Brian the Bee, Brian, B is the first letter of my name,
Yes,
to,
exactly.
um, I went to sell solar, home solar, so I became Brian the Solar Bee. So it's
Ah,
kinda like
okay.
my little, like,
Not that
shtick, and the way
golden
customers
ticket.
could remember me, and, I
Sure.
made cool, like, glow in the dark stickers,
Oh,
and
wow,
then
yep.
after that worldwide medical supposed crisis happened, and the biological cocktails were being issued, I fled San Francisco to Northern Nevada, where I currently am, to become
Okay.
kinda like an amateur low-level prepper here.
Yep, okay.
Um,
Okay, you
you
got all
know
your baked beans and your cans of goods, canned peaches and stuff like that.
Yeah,
You gone that far? Yep.
kind of, I'm pivoting now, but those are
Okay.
other plans. I won't,
Yeah.
they're still under wraps, but,
Alright.
um, uh, around that time, I discovered what I call and what others call the full disclosure movement.
Okay,
Okay,
yep.
because in my mind, it was like, wow, everybody, including my mother and father and brothers, have
Mhm.
rolled up their sleeves. We need medical beds as soon as possible.
Yeah, okay.
And, because I came
Yep,
out of medical advocacy, natural, I'm
yep,
thinking healthcare, right? And then
exactly.
thinking, well, how are we gonna get medical beds if most of the planet doesn't even know they exist, or if they do, it's something like you see on the Star Trek TV show.
That's pretty much like I came from a small country to Australia. I'm from New Zealand originally. Now, we never heard anything like where any disclosure, anything in general, even what you're talking about, there was no information that I remember growing up with that was in the public eye. So there was no awareness whatsoever like there is now. And that's why I thought it was important. Thanks to Christy Campbell for introducing us. That I think it's time that that people are aware that this is truth. This is really going on, and there's no more complacency really that should be happening. You know what I mean? So
It's it's a it's a tall order because the ultimate goal of the full disclosure movement, I'm speaking as a volunteer, self-appointed
yeah,
organizer advocate to the full disclosure movement, mind you.
yeah,
So for
yeah,
me, speaking on behalf of the full disclosure movement, for what that's worth, is to achieve the liberation of humanity
yes,
from exterior forces, be they negative ET, secret
mm-hmm,
government cabal, sold
yep,
out humans,
yep,
demonic Luciferian groups and entities,
mm-hmm,
interdimensionals, what have you, to liberate ourselves from them, to stand on our own 2 feet, to
yeah,
ascend spiritually,
yeah,
and with that, to then achieve technologically our Star Trek future, which is a blend
exactly,
of nature with
yeah,
technology, mostly,
it is,
hopefully, nature, a larger
yes,
spread of nature, and then some technology versus
yeah,
technology, a little bit of nature. That would
exactly,
be more the gray route until nature's gone, which is too
yeah,
dangerous. Don't want to
it
chance
is,
that.
yeah,
Um, and and with that, basically, that's achieved through full disclosure because in knowing the truth and breaking through the lies and distortion, now we can spiritually vibrate through in truth and
yeah,
ascend because now we're vibrating at a higher frequency because there's only so
yeah,
high we can vibrate if we're stuck in a funhouse maze of mirrors with our heads
yeah.
hitting the ceiling.
Well, because that sets people into such a fear-based reality that they themselves can't think straight anymore. So they don't have the concept of understanding that they can be more through love
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
themselves and all
They,
things.
they,
So
they got the programming and the blinders
yeah,
on, right? There's
that's
all the
right.
matrix
Yeah. And
thing,
that goes in that's not just in disclosure, that goes into all sorts of community and belief systems that are here. It's not, people, I don't know what you believe, but a lot of people only see certain things within what we know to be true. And a lot of that can go into a dark negative state. But the thing is, there's a lot of things that slide in and out of other belief systems that people haven't considered are part of the problem as well. So, this is why I think disclosure is important. It's not just one ideal of what is causing the problem. Some of humanity has allowed themselves to migrate that way as well, and they need to, sometimes you've got to, in order to change it, it's not all just the fluffy love and light idea. Sometimes you've got to take responsibility for what you yourself have allowed yourself to believe and then created more problems. So this is why I'm sort of trying to marry the disclosure idea with our own responsibilities of who are we, what do we
yeah.
believe, and what road are we choosing to go down. This is why I think it's important too. So a lot of self responsibility in that.
Well, it seems like what you're referring to, and a lot of us in the community, be it the full disclosure community, the spiritual community, I like to call it New Age Ascension. I prefer Ascension to
Yeah,
New Age, but they're
yeah,
all communities here, and they
they are.
overlap and intersect. Is the
Mhm.
concept of we're seeing a lot of, and we've always seen it from day one, and it's been baked into
Yeah.
the New Age movement because from the beginning with Alice Bailey and the Lucis Trust and all,
Mhm.
and out before that the
Yeah,
Crowleyans, they infiltrated and bred the New Age movement to basically hijack the ascension
they did. They
and to
did.
take it to divert it. Just like how
Yep.
in the 80s and 90s, Oprah and the Illuminati, they
Mm.
did the secret and they gave basically a false or distorted understanding of the law of attraction.
Yeah,
Okay,
and the ascension idea through law of attraction and many other belief systems and things like that. So, yeah, I
right.
totally understand that because I am aware of that a lot of that as well. Not the depth of what they did, but that is my understanding
Well,
through
let me
some
give an
experience. Oh,
L
yeah, go
let
on. Yep.
let me give you an example. What they did
Do.
basically did in a nutshell is they said, if you want to do the law of attraction, do your vision board and, pray about it and do your picture
Yep,
collages and all that.
yep, yep.
Um, but they never talked about, 1, after you envision it, do working for it and living your life in right aligned action with what you want to
Exactly.
achieve, taking
That's
it
right.
away from just this, like, totally mind over matter, matter doesn't exist thing, okay,
Mhm.
which is very super airy-fairy new agey,
It
and
is, yep.
then also they baked into it this basically Luciferian "do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law"
Mm,
ethos, and they
yep,
totally kept out of it the concept of, well, what is best and how does it resonate for the development of our souls and spiritual evolution, and what is
correct.
it in alignment with the will of the highest will of Mother, Father, God,
Yeah,
Goddess,
yep.
right?
Of the soul within you that is connected to all things. So, I agree with that. And I
Yeah.
know I'm the sort of person, I'm a deep thinker. I ask a lot of questions no matter what it is. I've always been like that my whole life. I was born that way, so I'm a little different. And there was just an inner knowing in me of not to allow myself to go into too much depth of a lot of that ideal. So I never read The Secret. I've not read anything. You name it, I haven't
You're not
read it.
missing much.
I ain't missing anything about what I've trust me. And I'm like, "Well, when did we become" 'cause see what it creates? It creates a weakness of not knowing yourself. So, as you said, the soul is the all-knowing, it's connected to all-knowing of all things, and what all of that stuff did is took people away from themselves of thinking in a creative and analytical way of, is that even just because somebody writes something or says something to you, have they lived it? Do they really know? Is it even true? And we got into, like you said, a place, and we're still in there, not, but a lot of people are, of they're not asking the questions. They're not questioning anything. They're just flowing, going with the flow. I'm like, well, we've gone with the flow for so damn long. That's half the problem why things have gone, excuse my language, my podcast, I say naughty things, tits up,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah.
You know what I mean? To be honest. So we've lost our
Abs
minds a little bit, you know?
Well,
So,
what you said right there, we've lost our minds, and
yeah.
discernment is first and foremost. That's the helmet of salvation for the armor of God, Ephesians 6:12. If you're gonna put on battle armor, which you should on a
Mhm.
battlefield, and you only have
Yep.
one piece of armor you can put on, the very first thing you put on is your helmet. And for the
Correct.
armor of God, that's the helmet of salvation, which is clear
Yep.
thinking and discernment, the
Definitely.
ability to see the battlefield clearly. Because if
Correct.
you're not wearing that helmet and your head gets rung easily and
Yeah.
you're seeing stars or, little
You're
birdies.
airy fairy. Yeah.
Yeah.
You've lost yourself. You've lost your own, uh, oh, damn it. It's my podcast, so I want. You've lost your own self completely. You've given your own self power, your own self worth, your own analytical thinking away to something outside of you continually. And you're going to loop. You will loop in there continually. You'll go around in circles. And this idea of that's the only way to reach ascension is completely false in its nature, completely false teachings, which came into The Secret and all the things you're talking about.
They
So
baked it in because you're talking
they
about
baked it in,
loops.
right?
When
Yes.
when when you say the loops, Marantha,
Yep.
who is dictating the loops that we get stuck in? They're trying to
Correct.
keep us in such the rat race loop of survival amidst
Yes.
all this tragedy and upheaval that
Yep.
we don't have time to smell the roses and do the spiritual work. And then they
That's
then put forward the new age people like Oprah and all that, who it's not about doing the spiritual work, it's how do you manifest things in your life, you know?
How do you become, that perfection? And like, okay, well, yeah, there's a lot that goes behind that idea. Like that's a whole topic in itself. But yeah,
Mhm, mhm.
I think the reason why I've stepped away from a lot of things myself personally in the last 4 months or so since I've been away is that I've, like I said, always asked questions, and I've had experiences that have been real, lived. So I've got to the point in my own journey, which comes into that topic of, do I really know it and believe it to be true? And in what way can I dig deeper to find out if that is so? Because I'm not a follower. I've not been a follower. My husband laughs about it all the time, makes jokes all the times about, man, Fiona follower. Um, and by stepping back and not being a part of so much for so long while I've been away, it took off a lot of the rosy glasses of what I thought I should be doing and achieving. And the funny thing out of all that, even though I am a little different, it gave me a sense of great peace because now it's only about myself and what I need to know that is true. So not as in selfishness, it's only about me, but unless I can change and start to become who I really am and think for myself, no matter what I believe, then I'm not free. I'm not at peace.
Right.
I'm
You
always
have
trying
you
to
have your
repay.
own
Yeah,
compass. Yeah.
exactly.
If you're not
So
able to be guided by your own compass, who cares what everyone else is saying and what direction they're going?
really has no significance in the end
Right.
because again,
Especially if they're false, if they're being because they're going to be misled. They're like, wow, everyone's
yeah.
jumping off the bridge. And did
Yeah,
you
so
know?
I'm gonna jump off the bridge. I'm like, Manta's like, no thanks. I'm not into
Yeah.
bridges. So
Right.
yeah, I
I'm
feel
not
ya.
I'm not going to roll up my sleeve either.
No,
Right.
no,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well said.
Yeah. Thank
Okay,
you.
yep. Carry on.
Thank you. Thank you. So, but this is part of my own spiritual journey. I'm sure it's going to sound familiar to everyone else, listening, and then I might not look 50, but I'm 50. I'm going to be 51
Oh,
in
yeah.
August.
Well done.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, um, part of that loss of discernment has definitely happened generationally.
Oh, for
People
sure.
born
Yep.
2000 and after didn't get exposure to a lot of things that we got to get exposed to. And then
Yep.
unfortunately, they grew up totally immersed in the cell phones and computers and
Mhm.
and much more developed advanced media, the TV and
Yes,
movies, and we even had like with VHS tapes and all that,
that's right.
Betamax, right? And it's culminated to a point where um with all the change and upheaval, if you don't know, if the general population doesn't know, it went from, "Oh, this sucks. People don't know that these things exist and they're being withheld from us. Oh, well, got to pay the bills," to, "Holy crap, the world is in such upheaval. The environmental damage, not from climate change, but from the pollution, probably pole shift,
Yep.
things like that, earth
Mhm.
changes,
Yeah,
and
it's
weather warfare and geoengineering and all that, um, it's imperative that we know, because if we
yes.
aren't demanding the med beds and the free energy or the 0 point energy that's been suppressed, um, the anti-gravity, um, not that we want to be able to use a time travel because it's so dangerous, but we wanna know that it exists and that
Yep.
rogue groups have been misusing it very dangerously to
Yeah.
shift our timeline and cause Mandela effects.
Yeah, that's right, and that's where it's gone. Like this I don't know how much you would understand, but this construct that has been created here where we are, just this place, it had a momentum, an idea of how it should flow, how it should, uh, grow, ascend, whatever you wanna call it. But there was a point where the whole idea of that was fixed went sideways.
It got
Well, the
hijacked.
sideways got hijacked, basically. So the plan of this place, as it should have been, was for a period of time. It was great here. But then I don't know if it's just when they introduce us out of petri dishes or whatever they did that we were the problem. I don't know. But
No,
we,
it what
know,
I can explain from what I
keep
understand.
on. Yep.
Okay, these are people who, like the Ashiana Dean type and Emerald
Yeah.
Covenant and,
Yeah. I'm
Christos
aware of that.
Anahazi.
I don't
Yeah,
follow any of that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm just throwing out some names, some people like Linda. Hello, Linda, and Raylene in our audience today, in the chat, live chat. They might be
Yeah.
familiar with some of these names, and,
Yeah.
I recommend our audience look up these names.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I know Christos. I know Christos
yeah,
Avatar.
yeah. Well, so he'll speak to the idea of these, light codes, the rays,
Mhm.
of light coming in down from, like, source, and
Yep.
permeating down to the more physical planes where we are now, in
Mhm.
between as, like, we all incarnated as beings, some
Yep.
of the beings became fallen, and then they decided they wanted to become the bullies on the playground and then take
Right.
over places like Earth, and then
Earth.
in the
Yep.
higher spiritual realms, they, began a war with God, and then
Yep.
they began to devolve spiritually, and then they began to mess with certain energetic spiritual apparatus of energy coming to this planet and to every living thing on it, Mother Earth herself,
Yep.
and they apparently reversed these certain energetic codes in the higher
Right.
spiritual realms, and then
Yeah,
that
that came
manifests.
through one of the higher Stargate systems, I think I've heard them talk about that or something. Yeah, okay.
Right, they take over the stargates, and then they, like, reverse the polarity of the stargate, so that now instead of coming from source energy, you're connected to, like, the negative realm, and that's,
Yep.
who wants to
Yep.
be connected? I'd rather be connected to fresh air and sun and beauty
Yep.
than, like, the sewage lines, like, bursting up and
Exactly.
shoving. Right.
Shit everywhere.
It's
Yeah.
just right.
Yeah. It's a mess.
So, and that's what the sold out evil ones and the puppets, that's what they want, and then
Okay.
that's what they've been doing, and
Yep.
that's where people like, Audrey, Waters, and others, they talk about, probably Katesh Healing down in Australia as well, I believe she is.
Yep.
Um,
Okay.
they talk about, uh, the Starseed Envoy program,
Okay, I haven't heard of
okay?
that. Yep.
So the concept is, wow, here's Earth, and we've got, uh for the longest time, it's been under the Orion, Draco group, Greys, but
Mhm.
mostly the reptilians. Earth
Yep.
has always been, like, under, like, reptilian turf. That's why the dinosaurs were here however
Mhm.
many, 65 million years ago or so,
Yep.
and
Oh,
before that. And apparently the deal is the dinosaurs were a failed experiment. They're too reptilian. They turned into giant monsters instead of, like, an advanced civilization where, they could, like, develop into what's known as a level 1 civilization, where
yep.
every body, would be like man, woman, and child if you're human on this
Mhm.
planet is well fed and cared for and sheltered and can have and educated and can have meaningful living, or
Mhm.
whatever life that what we want to have. That would be
Yep.
level 1, and then getting off planet into the stars, going from there.
Mhm.
Um, they don't want us to achieve that, and so let's see, where was I going with this? Um, the Greys, that wasn't gonna happen with the dinosaurs. And so apparently the these Galactic Federation types worked
Mhm.
out a deal. This is my research and
Yep.
everyone else's research, and I can name names, and I'm happy to,
Yeah, yeah.
like the Ascension Glossary. I mean, I've already
Mhm.
named a few.
Yep.
These folks, they talk about, Debbie Solaris as well, I think, and many others. Um, they talk about, like, uh, the Lyran Wars,
Mhm.
where you've got the center of the Milky Way galaxy, where you've got, like, the oldest stars and thus planets and thus life.
Mhm.
In around Lyra, that's where you had in the earlier days, like, cat people, and,
Yeah, that's
it's
right.
where, like, the
And
Thundercats cartoon is based on that.
yep. Yep.
And rabbit people and probably dog people and, all sorts of those types, but not
Yep.
reptilian, not lizard-like
Okay.
yet.
Yep.
And then no one exactly knows where, but from what I can gather, there's, like, another universe that they got kicked out of, or they destroyed, and they fell out of that one, and they got dumped into this one, and they
Right.
began rampaging, and they got stuck in,
Mhm.
like, Alpha Draconis, a little constellation called Alpha Draconis, and it's not called that
Yep.
for no reason.
Yep.
And they basically raided from Alpha Draconis over to Lyra because they're
Mhm.
like, "Wow, look, there's all these planets, literally Garden of Eden, but, like,
Yeah.
planets and planets of rabbit people and cat people who
Yeah.
are really tasty." And
Oh
that's
gosh.
where you know, the Lyran Wars is basically the Alpha Draconians in particular rampaging and taking over these worlds or destroying them, a few which they did if they didn't surrender to make an early example. And
Yeah.
then it's like one of my favorite memes is a run. Dun, 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 dun. So basically, they're all just like spread out because if you didn't
Yeah. That's
run,
what it
you were
was.
going to get eaten,
Done.
okay,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
enslaved to get bred and
Yeah.
then eaten. And
Gross.
so apparently they went from like Lyra to Vega and Sirius, um, and then uh, Orion and other places, and then you had the Orion Wars and this
Yeah.
Orion um, group, which would be the negative Alpha Draconians with like
Mhm.
the Siakar, like they might be like the Siakar Alpha Draconians, might be their proper name. I forget.
Yeah.
Um, certain negative Orion Gray groups.
Yep.
Okay, and then negative. They may even had some negative Palladians in there as well,
Yeah.
because not all the Palladians are wonderful people, right? Okay,
No, no. Yep.
unfortunately, although they're
Yep.
preponderantly portrayed in our disclosure community in general. What we know is they're generally more on the positive, but there are
Yeah.
some really negative groups,
Yeah,
and
there's
then
I think a lot of them are the military side of things, aren't they? Like some,
yeah,
yeah,
they're like
military Canadians and things like that. Yeah.
well, apparently there are Palladians that have hybridized with Draconians or some
Right.
type of reptilian groups, and then those are going to be the more negative, warlike,
Yeah.
rapacious.
Yeah.
Um, and then so that's why you've got all these megaliths, not just the pyramids in Egypt, but all over the world, where the pyramids are arrayed in line with the Orion constellation.
Yeah,
That's
that's
kinda
right.
like a gang sign, gang tag, like
A
Orion
little bit.
group,
Yeah.
Orion
Yeah.
group, like Earth is
Yeah.
Orion turf, okay?
Wow. Yeah.
And so, but somewhere before they decided to wipe out the dinosaurs, they apparently agreed with the more galactic federation types. These federations formed of all these races that had spread,
Mhm.
evolved into their own different groupings, more
Yep.
distinct, and then came back together because otherwise, like, they had to be like, never again. If we little kids on the playground without like the
Mhm.
advanced weapons and technology and claws and
Yep.
wings, if we don't get
Yep.
together, we're going to get gobbled up. And so you get the
Yep.
federations.
Okay.
And then I've not all the federations that are necessarily good, mind you, and
Yep.
a lot of them have apparently been infiltrated and hijacked,
Yeah.
or even if they're more neutral and they're trying, they still have a lot of
They're still
infiltration
part
and
of the
hijacking.
problem. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
There's a lot of internal turmoil is the only word, because a lot of people, are very into the Galactic Federation, things like that, and I've always had a little bit of a question around that myself, so I think it
Right.
pays if anything comes into a military faction or anything in that way, and it's for the initially the right reasons, you still gotta be a little bit cautious, I think, of their whole agenda, to be
Well,
honest.
you always have to be cautious, and I'm okay
Yeah,
with a military doing the right thing in the right
for
hands,
sure.
under the right leadership,
Absolutely.
with the right
Absolutely.
leadership, and
Yeah.
yeah, ethos, principles. But
Yeah.
I guess what I was trying to lead up to is the Starseed Envoy program. Is
Mhm.
first, uh, the reptilians agreed with these Galactic Federation types, the rabbit people that they hadn't already all eaten, and the Arcturians and the Greys and the Vegans and the Syrians and the Palladians, and apparently 22 to 24 of these different ET races, including the reptilians,
Mhm.
combined their DNA into one hominid form. Okay,
Right.
and you might say, well, why would you want to include reptilian DNA?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
it's for a couple reasons. You know, the reptilians obviously they wanted their DNA in it because they could then backdoor into humanity by entering the human part of the brain, right?
That's
Because they
right.
got that, or the reptilian part of the brain in humans, right? We
Yeah.
we literally call it the reptilian part of the brain because it's hardwired for survival.
Yeah.
Okay, because these other groups, the cat people, they're not necessarily so hardwired to survive no matter what. To
Okay.
where in situations if you have to be ruthless, I'm
Yep.
like the reptilians, they'll eat their young if they have to survive.
Yeah.
Most mammals and warm blood, they won't we won't do that to survive.
No, we generally
Okay.
don't. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. But the universe doesn't care. We end up
No.
somewhere where you gotta be not do that exact act, God forbid, no, but be, like, at
No.
that level of, like, survival and ruthlessness,
Survival.
like, I'm gonna do or die, basically. I use that as the
Yeah.
most extreme example, most extreme,
Yeah.
but that's, like
Yeah.
that defines reptilians in a way,
Yeah, it
okay?
does. Yeah.
Um, that they put that into humanity, and then so they wiped the slate clean, and you had the human experiment, and we've been Earth is like a nature preserve to compared to like the inner Milky Way center with like the brightest and biggest suns and oldest planets and oldest advanced life. We're out
Yeah.
here on like the eighth spiral arm out on the tippy tip,
Yeah.
okay, kind of like as a nature preserve where this experiment could occur. And then in
Yeah.
meantime, we've been a genetic repository for all these ET species. I
Yes, we
suspect
have.
as they travel further and further out from their planets and time
Yep.
goes on and they interbreed and mix more and more and do cloning and all
Yeah.
that, they need to come back to get their genetics refreshed.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, and then that's where you get all the hybridization programs.
Yeah.
But then still in the meantime, somewhere way back then, millions of years ago, the reptilians and the Anunnaki under or kind of Anunnaki leasing out the earth within the Orion Empire under these Alpha Draco reptilians basically were
Mhm.
enslaving humanity to mine gold. And so this
Oh,
is where you get
okay.
all these like Lemurian and Atlantean into
Yeah.
Egyptian legends
Yep.
and
Yep.
of the Anunnaki Elohim with all where their
Yep.
purses. We've got various artifacts and depictions. Sorry, of these
Yeah.
different ET beings like the
Yeah, I've had a
Huayholo stones from
bit of time with
Mexico.
Sean, so he showed me a fair bit of some of the artifacts
Okay, yeah, he's
and models
exactly.
and stuff.
Sean's a
I'm aware
great
of that.
friend, Sean Bond.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
of psionicleague.com.
He's got some amazing stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, they were abusing humanity, and from what I
Mhm.
can tell, and probably some of these galactic councils and federation types intervened, and then they cut
Mhm.
this deal where, like, the reptilians, they didn't have to leave because this is their planet, but they had to leave the site of humanity. They went
Yep.
underground. People talk
Yeah.
about them going under to inner Earth. Okay.
Yep.
And then
Right.
the Anunnaki, they kinda, like, I guess, got off the surface of the earth. They probably also went underground too, and then
Yep.
from their starships and kind of being in hiding amongst us, they've
Yeah.
had their pawns this whole time,
Right. Yep.
okay? And in more modern history from Lemuria to Atlantis to that flood 12 to 10,000, 11,000 years ago,
Mhm.
to the times of like Babylon and Samaria and the
Mhm.
Canaanites to more modern day, where like Turkey and the Middle East is now.
Yeah.
They basically had their chosen bloodlines to try to
Yeah.
manipulate humanity. And that
Yep.
would be where we get the Khazarians from. And so
Right.
there's this whole long history of what are now known as the Khazarian Mafia, and then this gets
Mhm.
us into, like, the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, and then the
Yeah.
Illuminati and
Yep.
the different the G group, the 33rd degree people, right?
Yeah.
And the three-letter agencies and all them, and they're all intertwined and they're doing pushing the same agenda, whether it's
Yeah,
in
they
the
are.
military, religious, education, political, cultural, healthcare spheres,
Yeah.
technological, on and on, military, on and on and on. They're trying
Yep.
to capture each sphere to encircle humanity and enslave us down the wrong path.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
it got so bad that according to Dolores Cannon and her quantum healing,
Mhm.
hypnosis healing technique, sessions
Yep.
over thousands of hours, thousands of sessions,
Yep.
and so many others have been backing this up, and all the people in our
Mhm.
community, or not all, but so many. Apparently, God's source put out a call to the realms, to all the beings, to say, "We have a problem here. This
Yep.
place has been hijacked. It's been off kilter for millions of years, hundreds of thousands of years. It's going in the wrong
Yep.
direction. And if Earth goes in the wrong
Yes.
direction and
Yep.
humanity, it can take a lot with it in the wrong direction. And
Correct.
so
Yep.
organically, we need to intervene. And so a call is put out for volunteers.
Yeah.
And For the Galactic Federation level types, this also would be an honor of the Prime Directive,
Yeah,
because
right.
it's a violation to come in from the outside and, like, come in, fly with their spaceships and land on the White House lawn and Tiananmen Square and Red
Mm.
Square and wherever,
Uh-huh.
all over the place,
Yeah.
and then possibly freak us all out and stunt the development of our culture because sects come
Start
out.
more
They're
war.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, there's more
And go
war
crazy.
and
Yeah.
religions and, like, yeah,
Yeah.
people start worshiping them.
I
They
do,
don't want
yeah.
that, okay?
No.
Um, they, that would be a violation of the Prime Directive. But
Mhm.
if they have some of their people incarnate down here on Earth
Yep.
as humans,
Yep.
and then have enough of us here on the planet
Mm.
just doing the work and living and
Yep.
increasing the frequency, and then
That's
with
right.
that doing the work, which naturally they come together,
Yep.
of liberating humanity from all this terrible background, hidden
Yeah.
background from us,
Yep.
okay, and distorted, then that can get us humanity liberated. We have the Star Trek future, and now instead of humanity, we're the track that we were heading down, where we're being enslaved by the Draco and Anunnaki and
Mhm.
Greys to do super soldier programs and become all transhumanist, and then they could
Yep.
use time travel and space travel and send us out in portals out into the stars and across dimensions to
Yeah, that's right.
basically rinse and repeat, take over like an
Yeah.
unstoppable, like the Star Wars Republic, a bad one.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
they don't
That's
want that
right.
to happen. And Alex Collier was speaking about this back in 1993. And,
Oh, okay.
Phil Schneider was talking about deep underground bases in 1993 and secrets.
Yeah.
He wasn't quite getting into secret space programs yet. I think they took
Yep.
him out before he could, but then
Yep.
others were then picking up the torch.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah, I call them truth speakers. They're a different breed. I think they're, mentally and emotionally a lot stronger than most because they won't allow anything other than the truth that they know. They won't even
Mind
allow
control
other things
won't work
within
on
them.
us.
Mm-mm.
It only works on
Literally,
us if we let our
yeah, go on.
ego get to us.
You gotta be very that is one thing. It's not that ego is bad, but there's a certain point within our ego that I call it self-righteousness messiahship that you've got to be very, very careful of because if you want to trap anyone who feels they're in truth, it's really easy to tweak the human ego into believing they're the only one that knows. That's one of the traps that I see a lot. So it's all right to have the truth, but you also got to have a bit of humility of understanding that, there's many, many truths that people bring as well in a lot
Let's
of
jump
ways.
into
So
let's
yeah,
jump into this, Marantha,
you
because
go.
we
Yep,
see in our community especially this is dangerous, and the reason
yep,
why, because and I've seen this before, people
yep.
have spiritual activations. Some people might say they're
Mhm,
kundalini activations. I mean, they
mhm,
literally describe like fire coming
yeah,
up their spine, and they're seeing people's auras, and like they're
mhm,
literally glowing, and people are like, look, like, wow, you're shining really bright, and they can read people's thoughts or
yep,
all sorts of stuff. And then they get targeted, right?
mhm,
Because the other side wants to shut us all down and keep us from being activated. But
yep,
a lot of times, especially people who aren't spiritually grounded,
mhm,
they have like the egos that could get carried away. They get activated. Suddenly they're psychic and they think they're Jesus Christ,
a little bit. That
right?
that
And his name wasn't even
only they receive the information, and that's a very that's a really dangerous statement to begin with.
right. And his name wasn't
Very
Jesus. It was Yeshua.
No, it wasn't.
So it's
That's
like you
right, it
don't
was
even know
Yeshua.
you like what your first name was, guy,
No,
or
no. Yeah,
or
that's
a
right.
lot of times for the ladies, because I haven't ever seen a female claiming they were Christ, but they're like,
Mhm.
Mother Mary or Mary Magdalene usually,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yep,
And, my answer is that they were probably activated. They got into contact with those beings and they could get fractals of that the energy and the lives
that's right,
that those beings may have lived. That doesn't mean
that's
that
right.
they were those beings. Just because, like,
No,
you got teleported back and you saw Christ on the cross doesn't mean that that was you, right?
no, no, that's right. Well, what happens is that when they're newly opened in that way, they're so vulnerable for a start.
Yeah.
and the intensity of the energy that they're connected to. So whether it's a Christ moment or a galactic moment or, whatever it may be, that moment, it is, like, very overwhelming because it is a greater love than we've remembered, because that's what we're here for, to remember that great love that we came from. So it can make you drunk with power if you're not careful, and it can make you believe that you are something you're not, or you're a part of something, or a reincarnation of something you're not. But it's not their fault. It's the love that they receive. Because I don't know how many experiences you've had. I've had a lot out of body and things like that. So I've been to those places awake.
Mm.
If you're not grounded in yourself, you don't know who you are. And a lot of people do claim they know who they are, but I mean really know. That love that you have forgotten can be overwhelming. So
Absolutely.
you gotta know how to live in it, you know what I mean? And
But there you
one
go.
of the
It's not
no,
their
go on.
fault, it's their responsibility.
It is their responsibility. Absolutely, I agree with that. So it's not that they're incorrect per se, like you said, they may be picking up fractals of that place, but it's just the immense, overwhelming emotion that they feel from that connection because they've been away for it for so long, they've been programmed, they've been removed from that memory. So I don't blame them for feeling that way and thinking those things, that that's who they are. But
W
generally,
we
you've
can
got to
add
question a little bit, go on. Yep.
we can add another factor which can even absolve that person who's like, "I'm Jesus," like that person, is that
Yep.
there are external entities who are ready to prey on people,
Oh,
especially people
absolutely.
who are newly activated and super vulnerable. And
Yes.
they can have dark beings, shadow beings, demons. You can
Yep.
have the other side, the people who are running MK Ultra programs or handlers,
Correct.
that they have their psychic abilities. You'll show up
Mm.
on their radar, and then
Yep.
now you're getting assigned to get targeted so that
Yep.
because they don't want people running around who can like levitate, active telekinesis,
Correct. Yeah.
telepathy,
Correct.
the works.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
we're I mean, I'm meeting people, not the levitation thing, but I'm meeting people who are telepathic. They can speak
Yep.
to the animals, full conversations.
Yep.
Angels, demons speak to them, give them accurate
Yep.
information, all
Yep.
sorts of
That's
stuff.
right. Yep.
And, the other side, they've been trying to it's like at first there's a few of us, a few David Wilcox, if you will,
Yep.
and to target and to make his life a living hell, okay?
Mhm.
But
Yep.
now there's more and more and more of us, especially after 2012, especially.
Right.
Um,
Yep.
2001 was a huge change, but after 2012 was like the floodgates began to open up. People who've been
Okay.
in these programs who have been MK Ultra mind controlled and had their memories
Mhm.
wiped. A lot of
Yep.
people, for whatever reason, their memories are coming back, and they're coming back
Okay.
incredibly detailed. Christy
Are
Campbell
they?
being one
Yep.
of them.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, she's
very very close
definitely.
friend. And
Yeah.
and and I seen Christy Campbell speaking about herself being a survivor. Was one of her alter clones was Raylene in
Yep.
the Montauk Project at Camp Hero Air Force Base, and she
Mhm.
was used as a breeder, and she was also
Yep.
used for her psychic abilities to
Mhm.
go on missions, um, with Joseph Powell and Arkeem Ra and Rocco
Mhm.
Fowler and, James Rink and,
Yep.
Susan Long and Veronica Bartolini, and, they all not all of them, and Steve Shear, John Whitberg, a lot of them remember being there in this different certain circumstances, and then some of them
Mm.
remember each other, and then in the
Yep.
same circumstances. For me
Yeah,
as a
that's right.
researcher, like, that's just
That's
going
full on, right?
chastity, yeah. In addition to
Yeah.
Christy Campbell, no relation as far as we know, there's also Chastity Campbell. And I can just
Oh,
keep
okay.
naming a whole bunch of names. Chris Laterre was also
Yep.
a Montauk experiencer.
Yep.
Um, yeah, so, what was I gonna say about Christy? Yeah, when people like her or Susan Long are activated, that
Mhm.
flips the script on everything.
Yeah, it
And
does.
and yeah, and so the
Yeah.
Montauk Project is a huge place for a lot of those of us, I think, in the movement because,
Yep.
I mean, Stranger Things, a TV show,
Mm.
billions of people have seen this show by now.
Yep.
That's based on Montauk, but all other projects that happened at, like, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, I believe it
Right.
was. if I'm properly quoting John Whitberg, you had something there known as the Project Ibis.
Yeah, I've heard
And
of that.
then after, um, Montauk got shut down literally at Montauk Point on the east end of Long Island when Junior, the psychic Sasquatch or some kind of monster, was summoned by the children, one of the children strapped in the Montauk trip chair to rescue the
Yep,
children from this base where they were being abused.
yep,
Apparently, they may have moved to New Orleans and also the
okay,
Presidio underneath San
yep,
Francisco. I mean, to the Presidio and right there in the San Francisco, right off the city there. It's like a military part. It's like a park in the area now. And that's
yep,
where you had Colonel Michael Aquino, who is like the one of the main founders of the military psyops program division.
mhm.
And he was a terrible Satanist, uh,
Wow,
abuser, PDF file. Um,
wow,
and he was also notorious at Montauk Project. Akeem
okay,
Ra has
yep,
memories, and many other people have memories. Penny Bradley probably as well of
yeah,
Colonel Michael Aquino, and not only how abusive he was, but
mhm.
I still have a lot of love for Akeem. We're kind of strained personal grounds right now. It's
Yeah,
politics.
I know of him, but I've not met him,
Okay,
yeah.
he has a lot of recall. He recalls being assigned, as part of the Montauk Project, the children, they were part of, like, a group called, like, the Shield of Baphomet, and they were
Okay.
basically because they're Luciferians, and they're doing the
Yeah,
devil's work
yeah,
to put humanity on an evil timeline.
yeah,
They would basically use time travel to, um, go to, like, 1970s New York and to commit the Zodiac killings. And
oh,
the
okay,
Zodiac killings wasn't just random killer, terrorizing New York over the course of, I think it was 2 summers, like
yeah,
75 and 76 might have been.
yeah,
Um, but it was to basically eliminate from the timeline, uh, a Christian group that
okay,
was known as the Church of the Sacred Heart. They're not Sacred Heart is kinda like Roman Catholic imagery, but they're not Roman Catholic.
not them,
They were the kind of Christians, inner city New York, where there's
yeah.
someone on the street, this makes me cry. Apparently, they would just, like, feed them or
Oh,
house
okay,
them.
so true Christian that way,
Yeah,
yeah,
a
yeah.
and this makes me cry. And when
It's
people
alright,
would
it's
ask him why
alright.
they did it, apparently they would just answer, "Because this is what Christ would do."
That's
And they
exactly
started,
right.
like, a movement in this other timeline that they weren't
Yeah,
removed from because they didn't have people like Colonel Michael Aquino tasking these child Montauk time soldiers to be
mhm,
put into clone bodies, super soldier bodies a lot of time, to
yeah,
then, mess with events throughout our time in history to divert us and make us a darker, more negative timeline. And
yeah.
so what this group apparently was going to do, I see comments. Thanks for being here, Linda, again, and Elaine too. What got to didn't
I'll
get to
answer
say
that
hi
in
to
a
you.
second if that's okay, Linda. I'll ask him in a second when he's finished.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
got a question
Um,
here. Yep.
okay, yeah. So
You're right.
this group began to grow in influence to the point where like they got like so much attention and support
Mhm.
and fundraising and organizing that they made it to like the Middle East to Palestine,
Oh, holy
okay,
cow.
to the Gaza Strip. And
Wow.
they weren't intervening by, doing like big noisy flotillas and wearing pink pussy
Yeah,
hats and waving
yep,
signs. They were
yep.
literally in the war zone in like Gaza, like delivering food and water. And they
Holy
weren't
cow.
preachy and handing out Bibles.
No,
Why are
just
you
living
guys
truth.
doing it? This is what
Yeah,
Christ would do.
that's right.
So
Definitely.
Aquino and the Luciferians couldn't have that, and so Arkeem, he shared with me privately and publicly, and I believe him
Yep,
because he
yep.
this really traumatizing recall is he was ordered not only to and him and others apparently, but to kill the members of this church. He said one looked literally like Yeshua. He looked like or like our
Sure.
curriculum, what we stereotypically like long hair,
Yep,
wearing like flip flops or sandals, you
yep.
know, like you look like Jesus or Yeshua, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
he was like the head of them, but he was like I guess like the figurehead, but really he was like, no, like we all anyone who's part of it's like we believe, right? We
Wow.
wanted to manifest the kingdom
Yeah.
here. Um, he was ordered by Aquino to the victims to take them out. Hey, Christy, speak of the Christy.
Yeah, we just said
Um,
hi. I didn't like to say hi because he was talking.
yeah, and C.
Cousin,
Rose Stevenson, excellent.
hi, C
Um,
Rose.
yeah,
Jane.
so Christy, I was talking about this one Montauk time travel mission to commit the Zodiac killings that Arkeem recalls, and he recalls how terrible it was, literally how to kill his person and like pull out their intestines and strangle them with it, and he's doing
Really?
this as in an altered state. So this is like you're on robot control,
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
this horrible act, like you're in a
Yep,
nightmare, and then
yep.
later on, he would come back to the Montauk base to like a portal, okay, um, and he would like he would say he'd hear like a tone, boop, like welcome to Camp Hero Air Force Base. The
Yep.
date and time is blah 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 blah, and he'd like fall on the ground and like a lot of the time he said he'd like vomit because he would be
Yeah.
switching altars
Oh,
out of, like,
gotcha.
the mind controlled altar,
Yep.
and then and he even remembers, and he's really angry about this, one of these missions, he's got, like, blood all over him, he just did this horrible thing, and he's recalling that Colonel Aquino, like, the one time that Colonel Aquino ever seemed, like, happy with him, you
Yeah.
know, was, like, he came
Gross.
back from, like, killing somebody in the most horrible way who would have, like, brought us a more Christ-like timeline earlier on, and he's, like,
Wow.
grabbing him, slapping him on the shoulder, like, "Good job," like, "Good job,
Nasty, isn't
son."
it?
Right,
Yeah, gross. That's just
okay,
so bad.
you
It's
know,
beyond belief. Beyond
yeah.
belief bad. Holy
So
cow. Yeah, well, that's where I think too, with a lot of the disclosure people, where they're learning to re-love themselves and forgive each other because they weren't really responsible. There was programs running through them all the time. So,
it's gonna be rough because when the time comes to
mm,
sort it out, who were the perpetrator abusers and then who were
yep,
the victims,
yep,
what happened is as the project went on and many tens of thousands of children, especially the vast majority were children because they figured children were the only ones that they could MK Ultra to the point
mm,
that they could activate their psychic abilities and control them with altars and, um,
yep,
have successful uh, work done for them through the Montauk trip chair. They would strap
mhm.
the children into something known as a Montauk trip chair.
Yeah,
Apparently,
I've
it's
I've
a pilot
seen that
chair
through
retrieved
Christian.
from a
Mm,
crashed UFO,
yeah,
which
right.
magnifies your telepathic abilities, and then
Yep.
that would enable them to then magnify their abilities to open up portals
Portals
in
and
time
stuff.
and
Yep.
space, and then they would
Yep.
send people through the portals.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
so, yeah, what Arakim and we call Montauk 1.0 would have been them
Mhm.
just, like, strapping kids in, "Oh, can you open a portal or not?" And apparently a lot of the children at that level, if they
Yep.
couldn't do it, they died in the attempt. So that's how a lot of the
Okay.
children died.
Yep.
And then they would open a child, "Okay, great, we got one who can open up portals. They're in the chair, they've opened up the portal. Now we gotta send these kids through the portal." So a lot of those
Exactly.
children, they didn't make it back.
Didn't make it either. Yeah. They
Right.
would have been fractioned to a bloody trillion pieces, basically.
Well, it
Mm,
depends.
yeah.
Montauk 1.0 is just getting it right. So you could open up a
Okay.
portal and send someone through, and they could end up in the Upside Down, or they could
Yeah,
end up in the
exactly.
Twilight Zone, or they could
Yeah.
end up in a heaven realm, hopefully. But,
Yeah. Yeah,
at the rate
hopefully.
those guys
Yeah.
were going, probably not.
Yeah. Was that part
Yeah.
of sorry to interrupt. Was that part of, that story, I don't know how long ago it was, where they found the, soldiers in the ship molded into the ship? Do you remember all that? That was
Yes,
a
well,
long time ago.
what that is that's how we got to the Montauk Project in
Okay.
the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s,
Yeah.
okay, and beyond now. Was from 1943. They had the US Navy ran probably about 3 different runs of what was known as the Philadelphia experiment.
Yeah, that was
And
what
what they did
yeah.
is they took sailors and they stuck them on a destroyer class naval ship called the USS Eldridge.
Mhm.
And on each end of the ship, stern and bow, like front and end, back, rear,
Mhm.
at each end of the boat with the sailors on it. And there were scientists like Einstein, I believe, and might have been even Tesla if he was still alive. They didn't want any
Mhm.
part of that because they said
Right.
this is not ready to expose humans to. This we're just
Yeah.
figuring this stuff out. It's dangerous and powerful.
Yep.
Well, when they cranked up the Tesla generators on each end of the ship, not
Mhm.
only did it achieve what they wanted to achieve on paper, they said radar invisibility.
Mhm.
They literally ripped holes in time and space. And that
Yeah.
ship and all the sailors on it
Yep.
began to jump around in different places. Um, I think they came off the coast of Virginia. One of them, they might have jumped to like right off Montauk Point, like Oyster
Mhm.
Bay or whatever, or north of Montauk Point, and then like back to Philadelphia.
Right.
And
Okay.
while they were in subspace or warp space,
Mhm.
the sailors, their bodies were able to kind of like merge like ghosts in and out of the ship.
Right. Okay.
And when the power was cut by the people who were apparently in the engine room, Duncan
Yep.
Cameron and his brother, the Cameron brothers, according
Yep.
to the lore as written by author Peter Moon, as told to him by some people who've whitewashed the tale, especially Preston Nichols. Okay.
Okay.
Um, they when they cut the energy to the Tesla generators and the ship dropped out of subspace, if you were
Yep.
one of these sailors where you were
In
intertwined with it,
between. Yep.
then you too then that's how you they died
Wow.
very painfully, and there are
Mm.
photos here. While we're speaking,
Yep.
I'll pull up the, Philadelphia experiment photos, but needless to say, what the Philadelphia experiment was the US military's attempts to catch up to the Germans when they already had Die Glocken, Hitler's bell,
Yep.
which was a time travel machine, and also the
Okay.
Hannibal, the flying UFOs with like the Panzer turrets and the black cross on them. Okay,
Okay.
so I've pulled up here some images. Let me share my screen. And what the audience is going to see is a mix of real photos from that ill-fated Philadelphia experiment and fake ones. So this is fake. This is like a recreation. Recreation. Okay? This is real. This
Hang on. Is
guy,
it not? We're not seeing anything. Hang on. That should.
uh,
It's not adding. Hang on.
it's not
Oh,
letting
is
me
it?
share.
No, it's not adding. Did you not accept host? Did you accept the host that I sent
I
you?
thought I did because it says I'm sharing my entire screen. Let me see. I'll hit stop sharing again. Hey, Mike. Mike Humans here. Margaret Rogerson has joined us as well. Thank you for being here, everybody. I'm going to try share my screen again. I'm going to hit
Oh,
entire
hang on.
screen.
Let me do this and see if it'll come this way.
Okay.
Try that.
Okay. I hit share screen. Right now, it's a blank screen. It's a blacked out screen.
Yeah, it should allow images to come up, but for some reason it won't. Why not? Not
Well,
sure.
tell you what.
Doesn't usually do that. Anyway,
Well,
yep, go
no,
on.
no
Doesn't
worries.
matter.
No worries. The pictures are out there on the internet. They're really easy to see, but they're
Okay.
basically Kodachrome type 1970. They almost look like, but they're I guess maybe they'd be colorized, but you'll see them.
Yeah.
There's sailors sticking halfway in and out of a wall and like
Yep. Seen
coming out of the
those.
hull of the ship.
Yep.
Anyway,
Okay.
um, that was when they said, "Wow, there's something to this Tesla technology," and they went from Philadelphia there to Brookhaven National Laboratory, which is on the
Mhm.
middle of Long Island, right? So you could
Right.
have like the egghead scientists living in Manhattan and New York, and then they
Mhm.
could go Jackie Robinson Parkway or Expressway or whatever to Brookhaven National Lab, where you'll see particle accelerator ring. Two of them,
Oh,
in fact,
okay.
at least if you look down from the air.
Yep.
And they from there probably decided, wow, this is really dangerous. We need to move further out. And then that's when they went all the way to the east end of Long Island to the
Yeah.
then supposedly decommissioned Air Force Base with its
Okay.
underground bunkers.
Right. Okay. There's a few of those. I think we've got some of those in Australia. Apparently, we were talking about that a few months back.
You got
I
Pine
think I was
Gap.
talking to
Pine,
Sean. Yeah. Yep.
what was the other one that you said?
No, I was talking to Sean, and he
Okay.
said that he said to me, maybe spend some time looking to see what else is here in Australia, because he was talking about some underground bases and
Oh yeah.
things like that.
Well,
Yep.
Pine Gap is the Montauk Project of Australia. Then you
Okay.
have Sir Anthony Kidman,
Yeah.
Nicole Kidman's father, with the
Oh, really?
SRA
Yep.
circles down there,
Oh, true.
all
Okay.
linked in. And
Yeah.
then you had Uluru, I believe, is one of the Earth's natural stargates.
Yes, aware of that.
Yeah. And then Cooper Pedy
Okay.
is just really cool.
Yeah, I've been there.
Yep.
It's out in the middle of nowhere, but it's
Yes.
lovely. It's a beautiful
Lovely.
place. So,
Mhm.
this Linda's asked a question, but I don't know if it's relevant. If you want to
It is.
answer that, but she wanted to know about Bashar. Is that
Yeah.
how you say his name?
Yeah, Bashar. I would
All
love to
that?
speak to
Yeah.
that. So we're talking about various groups, ET, demonic, and otherwise Luciferian, that want to
Yep.
hijack humanity and lead us down the wrong path.
Yep.
So, I'm not judging Daryl Anka as a human individual, but
No.
the entity he's channeling, known as Bashar, okay, claims to be a collective of Sasani that's like kind of gray humanoid
Mhm.
beings. And they're supposed to be
Yep.
an enlightened collective, and they
Mhm.
want to share their wisdom with humanity. Okay.
Mhm. Correct. Yep.
So, in this community, number one, he is absolutely channeling something. Daryl Anka, he's not faking that. So just
Mhm.
put that aside, and our audience is going to know that he's channeling something. But who and
Yep.
what is he channeling?
Correct.
Um, I don't think he's channeling actually the Sasani. I think he's channeling some kind of probably more gray, Zeta
Mm.
Reticulan gray collective,
Yeah,
maybe with
that's what I
some
reckon.
reptilian influence.
Some of his information is a little bit a bit borderline. I don't
He
watch him a
pushed
lot. I've only seen
he
him a little bit here and there, but some of it as a channel myself, I feel everything and I hear and see things. I'm that sort of person. And there's been that's why I haven't gone that way and watched him and gone part of that. There's been a few things that he's come out with and said in some of his channelings that have made me go, "Oh my, what? What did you just say?"
right.
A little
Well,
bit questionable.
Well,
So
I'll name them. He encouraged
yeah,
everyone roll up their sleeves and get
yeah,
the cocktail. And
yeah.
he literally on his website, I don't know if it's still there because I couldn't find it last time I checked
Don't know. Yeah.
recently, but it did say, because I confirmed this for myself, it was like something
Mhm.
like Bashar recommends everybody follow the advice of the experts at the World Health Organization and CDC,
Did
etc.,
he?
and get your
Okay.
COVID-19 blah blah blah.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
And that was my
Probably got taken
confirmation.
down. That would have
Well,
been taken
yeah,
down pretty quick,
and
I'd say, but yeah, no, I never saw
and
that. Like I said, I don't follow him, I just am
Sad
aware of him. Yeah.
Sadhguru also pushed them as well, and he has
Yeah,
subsequently later on had
that
to
is
get
one
brain
gentleman I couldn't warm to. I'm sorry,
right,
there's a few.
and
Yeah.
he had to get brain surgery,
Right.
in recent years.
Mhm.
Um,
But a lot of them have been,
basically
disclosed at the moment. A lot of those so-called self-deemed New Earth leaders are being, brung into things that we agreed we wouldn't
yeah,
go into, so we won't go
yeah,
into,
right,
but
with
people are
Deepak
aware of
Chopra,
that.
right, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
Deepak
and all that jazz.
Chopra
Yeah,
he got outed because of a certain information got
yeah,
released to the public, right?
yep.
So, um, yeah, so what Bashar, whenever people ask him about the Illuminati, the dark forces, he always
Mhm.
gives the same answers. "Oh, that's just a projection of your shadow self, and you
Oh,
need to
does
deal
he?
with your own fears." So he's always downplaying the conspiracy, New World Order, transhumanism stuff, and
Yeah.
he's always pushing the spiritual bypassing love and light. Suck
Oh,
it up,
okay.
buttercup. Love
Yeah,
yourself more by looking in the mirror. It's like,
yeah.
no, we need to figure
Well,
out
there's a
who's
bit of
under our
truth in that statement, like, let's just be honest. There's
well
some
well well,
truth
that
in the
well,
way they
and you're
deliver
exactly
things,
it well,
but
it's
yeah,
no well, it's true that we need to look in the mirror, but it's not true that that's
Yeah.
just a figment of our imagination and shadow projection. There
Yeah.
are forces who are running underground bases, kidnapping
Mhm.
children,
Correct.
hijacking us in space, selling us for
Yeah.
genetics and body parts.
Yeah.
So that's not just,
You
oh,
just
it's a
can't
projection of my
ignore
shadow
you can't
self.
just ignore, this is what you're saying. You can't just bypass and ignore the obvious for a lot of
And that's what
things,
he's
which
trying
is
to do. He's trying to paint a worldview, a distorted worldview where none of that exists when it obviously does. And and
yeah.
and the by extension of if it doesn't exist, you don't have to do anything about it,
Yeah,
right? And
that's
so
right.
that's
It's easier
so
just to
to answer
ignore the
Linda's
problem than,
question,
to accept there is a problem. And that's a
right? You
lot
don't
of
even know it exists.
yeah, that's right. And that doesn't free people,
No, it keeps us
you know?
entrapped because we're enslaved
No,
by invisible bars of a lie.
exactly. Yeah, it's unnerving. It's just there's so many things that you can go into on all that sort of stuff, but we won't have time. But yeah, the idea of bypassing and ignoring things because they make you uncomfortable is not growth.
No, no. In fact, it's
It,
anti-growth.
it
It's
is completely
anti-Christ in the long run.
it is antichrist. Yeah,
You know,
it
if
is.
it leads us to spiritually evolve and grow, it's Christ. If it leads us to spiritually devolve and be trapped, it's anti.
It's a
Um,
dumbing down programming, really, isn't it? If you want to call it something simply, it's a dumbing down.
yeah,
It's a
like in
program that dumbs.
1984, Orwell talked about Yitzhak, this or Ingsoc, these languages where they've removed all the high vocabulary words and kept it to like dumb down vocabulary. So then
Mhm.
people can't even think of higher concepts to realize freedom and liberty, democracy, justice are
Yeah,
things in the first place to
yeah,
strive for. And this is
that's
a
right.
very similar tautology, I would say, with Bashar and a lot of these new age gurus who are
Yeah.
trying to push spiritual bypassing. I call it love and light,
Yes.
LUVNLITE, and
Mhm.
not doing the shadow work, not doing the
Yeah,
confronting darkness. And,
yeah,
addition to cultivating the light within ourselves, we do that by confronting the darkness. How do we know the
correct,
measure of our light if we can't walk into the dark?
correct. That's right. The greater the shadow, the greater the light. So, anyway, that's a whole lot of subject too. Don't get Marantha started because she goes down the box a lot of it. I just see it as a weakness of the spirit if you allow that concept within you, because then now you're not helping the rest of humanity not only to find themselves, to grow and eventuate into love. We're gonna have to go through the mess. We can't deny the mess to get there. That is an illusion in itself. You know what
And
I
and
mean?
and and partly it's we're gonna have these uncomfortable conversations, and then it's like I will, in a principled manner, denounce Bashar for saying
Yep,
such terrible things, but then
absolutely.
I'm gonna have some forbearance for the human, and
Yep,
to say, "Well, I really disagree," and you need to, like, check who you're, channeling and what they're saying, because at a
yep.
certain point, like, if they're saying such a bad message and it's off, you
Mm.
really that's
You need
they're
to
they're
question
his
that.
job, you know?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I
It
know
just
Mark.
making like you said, I wanna say that again. I wanna reinforce
Mhm,
that.
mhm.
This is only discernment on the question that Linda's asked about Bashar. As a human being, he's a decent human being, heart of gold. As far as we're aware, I don't like I said, I don't follow, so I don't know much about a lot about his personal self. But I think as a human being, he has a genuine want for the right things. You know what I mean? But sometimes we just get caught up with those that we're communicating with, of whether it's true or not. So
Well, someone was asking a question earlier, not too long ago, about or their statement. C. Rose Stevenson seems like these
yeah,
people start out good and then get corrupted or exposed, and that's exactly what. Yes,
yeah,
because
true.
what happens is the bigger you get on this stage or any other stage, music,
Mhm,
Hollywood, the
mhm.
more attention you're gonna get from the other side, and the more
Correct.
they're
Yeah,
gonna wanna control you, and the more they
yeah,
wanna control you, and the less that you wanna be controlled, the more black magic and other things, cyber stalking,
mm,
whatever social engineering tools they got, voice to skull, they'll bring to bear against you. And then
yeah,
if you don't have a grounded ego, if you're not doing the spiritual hygiene, then And then if you're indulging in substances,
Yep.
especially or alcohol too much, then you can go astray. And then we
You
see
can.
these all the time. Or you can
Yeah.
be sold out. You can sign contracts and cut deals behind the scenes with certain families whose names I mentioned earlier.
Yep. And they're not even aware that they've made that agreement. They still think they're channeling something of the highest love or light within them. So, but what the people don't understand is a channel, if you don't know yourself as a channel, then you are very open to corruption, extremely open. So, and I always tell a lot of people that come and see me all the time that just because something sounds lovely and is bright and beautiful doesn't mean it is so. That's can be
Mm.
some of the trap. I've seen lots
False
of
light.
things.
False
False
light.
light. Absolutely. I've seen lots of beings off-world, that jazz, that some people couldn't handle, but it doesn't make them dark and nefarious. They're just weird looking to you and I, which is
Mhm,
normal to them. A lot
mhm.
of the bright and sparkly ones, you really got to have discernment over, because sometimes it's a hologram and sometimes where's that hologram coming from? And I'm always a little bit cautious on all the too fluffy, too nice, and too grand information, where it's
So
just the information's just flat. It's one ideal, one way of bringing information. If there's no depth to it, and there's lacking a little bit of truth, it's just all a bit too fluffy, I question that too. I teach people, question that, because it shouldn't all
absolutely.
be one way. It shouldn't be delivered in that only love and light perception, because that's then teaching you again not to think for yourself. Just follow us. This is the only way. And people will do that. They worship, follow that idea, whether a channel or just someone who's watching the channel. And that's where they get got, because they
Well,
don't even question that. You know what I
let
mean?
me let,
So
let me share a fascinating example.
there
I
you
was
go.
working with people in our community who were supposedly in contact with a Galactic Federation type emissary,
Yep.
and but they were trying to give us bad advice or advice like keep me out of
Mhm.
the leadership because somehow I was too erratic. And so I started to question. I was like, wait a second, your contact is telling both you,
Mhm.
David, and you, Audrey, telepathically, the
Mhm.
same contact. They're like, yeah, it sounds like her.
Mhm.
Um, her name's Gianna, right? Quote
Mhm.
unquote. Um, and I said, "That's interesting that, like, that you would make these recommendations. Normally, that's well, Gianna, what's your like, who are you? Like, where are you from? Da da da." And all of a
Mhm.
sudden, David's like, "Oh wait, Gianna, what? Wait, you're getting really faint," and then like cut out, and that
Oh,
being like
okay.
totally cut out. And then
Yep.
later on, when we were speaking to, like, other contacts of theirs,
Mhm.
I'm not sure if I'm garbling this exactly, but it went along the
Oh, that's
lines
right.
of like, you know, why didn't you guys who are apparently part of the federation who do wanna help us, how
Yep.
come you didn't say anything while this imposter was basically telling us all this BS about Brian for the last 2 weeks? You
Exactly.
wanna
Why
know what
didn't
they
you
said?
question that? Yeah, go on.
They said, "We had to let you learn the lesson the hard way, that you can't just accept whatever anybody identifying themselves as whoever says. You need to
Mhm.
question them and think with discernment,"
That's right. That's
and
right.
so there are
Yep.
times when Source will step back and let us get, the demons, like, beat us up a little bit. "Well, why do you do that?" "Well,
Yep.
you needed to learn a lesson." "Oh, okay."
That's right. Where's your sovereignty? Are you
Right,
just taking everything on as it is and face value because it's coming through you and you feel you're enlightened or ascended?
right.
Like, it's just crazy. It
That's
truly
right.
is crazy. I've had a lot of stuff. I've been in this, online anyway. I've been at this job for 30 years, but online for about 6 or so, might even be just over 6 years or so. And the amount of times that I've had to exit because of the judgment, because I question. So I know exactly what you've gone through, where if you question the purity of the love and light information or ideal as a questioner, or as someone who goes, that doesn't feel right, and the
Mhm.
backlash that you get from that is horrendous. First thing, they'll look to see what's wrong with you. First, then they'll go into judgment of you, of what they think you are or what might be with you, and it just goes down a whole rabbit hole. Now, if someone asks questions on things that don't seem balanced mentally, then you got to be wondering why they're asking you that. Because not
Exactly.
everything I've received over the years from all sorts of different people, many years ago, made any damn sense whatsoever on anything that either in my life or outside of that. So
But they
the
yeah, they have to
discernment
stand
is
up.
very lacking, you know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
seriously. So I get it. Yeah, I've been there. Miranda has
Yeah.
been through the muck to get to where she is. She has. I just want to
Mhm.
read a couple of comments. No one wants to stand up and speak the truth because of repercussions. Exactly, Elaine. Exactly.
Well,
And
not no one, most people, but some of
most
us wanna
people.
stand
Yeah.
up. We'll stand up,
Some people. Some
despite, and
are. I am.
that's
Yeah.
the full disclosure community. That's
Yep.
us. You know, we're
That's right.
here to speak the truth, so it's not no one, but it's and there'll be more as we go, as more and more people get clued in.
Yeah.
Um,
And
I
that's the
think,
idea. You become the example of the strength it does take to become sovereign. This idea
mhm,
of becoming sovereign is not fluffy. It is it comes with a mix of self, figuring yourself out, but it also comes with a lot of discernment. And that's the first thing you'll go through. And excuse my language, but it can be a bit mindfuckery. But keep going because you'll get there in the end. Your strength
yeah.
will come from that. You know what I mean? So it's not easy. What does Zero says? I have been, yes, Marantha has been through the muck for sure, but I came out sparkly. Oh, gee, thanks, girlfriend.
So someone asked if Yeshua was part human, part Palladian. My understanding, okay, this was through Kimberly Palm,
Yep,
is that I don't think so, and I know, and he definitely he laughed at if when I asked if he was ever a Venusian.
yeah,
Okay, so no, so note of being a Venusian, and I don't think so as a Palladian.
yep,
And
okay.
then Christy Campbell definitely speaks the truth. Christy, I was
Yeah,
speaking earlier in the show about how I know so many people, including James Rink, who's passed, but
yep,
um, you know, between like Joseph Powell, Rocco Fowler, Arkeem, Susan Long, and Veronica, remembering you at Montauk and vice versa. You know, for us researcher, organizer, advocates, that's the gold standard. Multiple people who hadn't
that's
met
right.
each other out and about in the 3D world having the exact
Mm.
same testimonies.
That's where the fact comes in when you really do meet people who you don't even well you don't remember, but you don't really know here in the human world, and they've had exactly the same experiences as you is absolute proof in that, as far as I'm concerned.
You know.
Uh, So is there
But
anybody else that'd like to ask Brian anything? Please do, because that's what brings in more information that he can go deeper on. I'll just go through while you're talking to see if I missed anybody, Brian.
mhm. And then for anyone else watching the replay of this, please, obviously like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell.
Mhm.
But my favorite is leave a comment, if you have
Yeah,
any questions, not just for me, but for, crowdsourcing is cool and Marantha.
yep, yep. I find a constant challenge I speak outside the mainstream narrative, then I know I'm on track. Correct. Hi, Leanne. How are you going? Exactly.
You live a
The
lot longer
analytic
that way.
Yeah, well, the analytical mind tends to get frowned upon a bit in the New Age movement and spirituality and things, because it challenges the narrative. That's all. And we're not doing this out of judgment or any way attacking. It's a discernment of truth. If you don't ask questions about you, what you're connected to, what you believe, even the belief system or the community, then we can't create change. We can't bring in new information. We can't bring in what is true because it gets locked over here in a little box and people won't question or listen to what is true. So sometimes people like us have got to break the mold. We've got to come out of things. That's part of while I've been away. It wasn't just my own stuff, what most of you are aware of. A lot of it was it was time for me to step away because what I knew and what I was experiencing in many different ways and what I used to know wasn't resonating anymore. It's not that, I mean, most people know that I'm a fighter, I'm a truth speaker. They all know all that about me. But there's a moment too where you got to step back from what you think you know and have a really good look at it. And I realized that a lot of things that I was supporting and a part of don't resonate for truth. That's all. It's not personal. I'm not trying to shut down a community and things like that. I'm just letting you know I'm living things that are now showing me truth. And once you come into that place, you don't return back the same. So the
Can't go
person I
back.
was last year is not the person I am now. She's gone. You cannot return. And it almost, I don't know what you believe, Brian, it's almost like I can go a bit weird, but it's like the hand of source comes in, picks you up, and says, "Who do you think you are? Are you sure about that?" And you have a look at that, and you realize that you aren't. So it's time to look for what are you? What do you know? What is true? And that's the process that I've gone through. So when the hand of source picks you up, and that's the honest truth, hand on heart, you can read me, I ain't lying, and it brings you back here, you can't, there's no part of you that you can't even say I can't return, because even that makes no sense to you. There is no return. There is no
Yeah.
return when you enter into truth.
It's like we only
And
can grow older. We can't shrink,
I
you know?
can't shrink. I can't go back to her. And she did no wrong. She wasn't incorrect because, like I said, I am a bit out there like that. But there was a part of me that sat for a while to keep the peace, to not rock the boat, to make people happy. And I've not come back to break it in a way where I'm here to harm, hurt, or judge. That's not it at all. I'm just walking as the one who is aware. That's all. The one, I'm not saying I know everything, because there's so much that I've realized that we don't know, but we're doing our best to remember that. So it's not
All
easy.
will
Not easy.
all will be revealed in time.
All will be definitely revealed. I've even seen that myself. So,
Yeah.
and to be honest, it's already been revealed now in little minute pieces anyway. So people are aware of the change. But over the next few years, there'll be more. I was told 2032 is when that consciousness shift really becomes in our face.
It sounds about right. I'm
Yeah,
hearing, yeah, it's accelerating already, but it'll be more in full swing by then.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Whether that's, people have asked me, is that a contact? Is it a visit or that? I said, not necessarily, no. It's just an awareness where we've had enough. That's what starts it, and then the rest of it will come in as well. So I
I
think there'll
like
be
to
a
think,
little bit,
well,
you know.
I like to think it'll be open by then because there are
I
already
hope
people here on the ground who are in contact with their starseed family, not just in dreams and telepathically, but there are
no,
people reporting physical meetings. Like they beamed down next to me and I met with them for however long and they disappeared or however,
yeah.
but they
Well, that's
were,
me. I've had physical visits.
okay, so
I've
there you go.
even, yeah, I've had physical visits. That's why I said I can't go back now, because I'm living it.
Right.
I've had
Yeah.
um I've had ships over here. We had a massive event here two or something years ago. And my husband's, who knows it's true, understands it, but he's just like, unless I see it, he's that type of person, which we've all been that. He got to
It's all
see
right.
something out here one evening
Mm-hmm.
off the water, 'cause I'm right by the water in the ocean.
Yeah.
So I'm one of the people that has physically had it, not read it in a book. So I've
Right.
had physical visits, and I've had them again just recently. So,
Well,
and I mean,
I'm not
like
just
walking
talking.
through my wall here, like
Yeah,
I'm looking at you.
exactly. Like they, exactly
I
like that level.
them, touch them physically and
Right.
felt
So
them. Their
so
skin
you would
is
say
pretty.
that's disclosure. You've had direct
It is
contact.
disclosure.
There
Yeah.
you go. Yeah.
And that's part of my thing. My thing now is that because I'm one who's living physically in the
Mm.
whole idea of all this, part of my role here is that energy within us, the information. It's not always how we're talking or discussing or living, but the energy that runs through you, which is part of that Christ energy that you talk about. That's the truth. Christ means truth. That energy permeates out of you wherever you go. So it's waking up people even without verbalizing or speaking or doing, you know what I mean? It's within you anyway. So it's there, it's running everywhere through the planet, regardless of whether we talk about it on a podcast or we don't. Because
Yeah.
once you wake up and you can't go back, you are the awakening. So therefore others will feel that. And that starts their process, hopefully, you know. So anyway, does anybody want to ask a question? Because I'd like to go here for as long as possible, but I've actually got work in an hour. So um, is there anything anybody
Let's
would like to ask? Or Brian,
what
you'd
I'd
like to
say is,
talk about?
what I'd say is like let's kind of let's end it here for now. But I would like
Okay.
to come back and
Yeah.
please people put in the comments what you would like for Marantha and I to speak on, where we can pick back
Yeah.
up.
Yeah, that'd be
Yeah.
good. And I'll go back and check those over a period of time and write it all down and keep a record. I'll put it into my files. The only other thing before we go, and that, do you want to talk about your friend, that the gentleman that you mentioned to me? Is there anything there that you think that people would like to be aware of?
David was a light worker. He started out really, really amazing. He had great material, but then at certain point he was a victim of targeting, probably likely, according to the psychics I've been working with. He was targeted all his life,
Right.
and especially the last 15 years of his life, and he got run down to the point where he was driven to that. And
Yeah.
so I just want to kind of, on behalf of him and for his family, negate the idea that he got like, you know, he's in Valhalla right now and he's gonna like come back, and reveal that he was in a witness protection program 3 years from now. I don't think so, guys.
No, no,
Um, and so
I believe that.
yeah, he was driven to it. It was in front of the Boulder sheriffs in broad daylight.
Oh,
His
jeez, okay.
family and friends who are closest to him are not surprised.
Yep,
One thing I guess I want to leave off here in terms of the lessons for him that we should
yep,
learn with his passing, because he inspired so many of us,
yep,
is that even though someone may say over and over on their podcasts or their tweets, "Oh, I would never do it. I don't, I won't do that." And I know the spiritual repercussions and ramifications of doing that. Um,
mhm,
the more someone says that, the more it's on their mind, and the
yeah,
more that it's actually a danger factor. And then that's where the community needs to step up, if we can. And many
yeah,
people tried and did. So it's not like,
yeah.
oh, hey, we just dropped the ball as a community. People sent David money before he passed there.
Okay.
But he just, what some people's read, and I tend to agree with it, is that he was under so much psychic negative black magic, MK Ultra mind control attack.
Mhm.
Who knows,
Yep,
beam weapons, whatever. I know that all that stuff exists.
mhm.
At the same time that he was bankrupt and divorced, and his dog had
Yeah, yeah,
died,
so
and
yeah,
bad physical health, and his mental health was declining, and
yep. We just
lawsuits,
found
and the
out.
IRS was after him.
Mm,
You
yeah,
know,
right.
it was like you had all the human just weight of life, normal
Mhm,
3D life, and then on top of
yeah,
that, the black magic and targeting. And
mhm,
so, um, there are lessons we learned that we as a community could have helped. And then also what I'm told is that from a spiritual psychic standpoint, they didn't the people I've talked to with scanning it, remote viewing, however you want to say it, contacting with him, connecting with him, he wasn't doing any spiritual hygiene work and cleansing. And,
mhm.
if he's at that level with that level of attack and that level of attention, and distortion around him,
You
then
gotta be
that's
pretty strong. Mm,
yeah, you gotta be strong and you gotta be on top of your game, and even then, right? And then if you had all those factors just chipping away,
yeah.
so I've got no judgment there, and, I'm
No,
obviously
no.
sorry he did it, and,
Yep,
I think he'll come back to a new earth and get to repeat these lessons, but,
yep,
hopefully on a brighter planet.
yeah. Yeah, well, like, I've seen things like that many times, even just if it isn't targeting, and what it is, the soul just not the soul, but the person within the soul just runs out. They literally run out completely of life force and want and desire
Drained.
to be, and you can't hold that against them. A lot of people are a little bit anti that ideal, but I've seen enough of it that I'm just sometimes it's a grace for them to leave. Kind of a blessing because now they get to have some freedom for themselves. So it's not easy being here in this world as a human being. I
No,
can tell
uh,
you that.
no,
Very difficult.
it's
Yeah.
been very rough for the light workers lately, but
Mm.
hang in there,
Yep.
everybody. Hang in there.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. No,
Support one another best you can. So,
exactly.
all right. Well, Brian, we'll might end it there because I've got to work and I want to at least have half
Mm,
an hour break in between.
yeah,
So thank you
please
so
do.
much.
Thank
We'll
you,
definitely get
everybody.
together and we'll get Brian to go because there's so much in his information, which I'll put down in below. It'll be in the recording, the replay that you can read about him. There's so many areas that he is a part of and that he covers and he knows would blow your mind basically. Like even when I read it myself, I was like, holy cow, he's deeper than I realized. So
Oh,
we'll
thank you.
definitely get him on in the future when he's got time and we've both got time. Um, yeah, just to give us a little bit more insight on especially the disclosure side of things.
Oh, there's so
And the
much we can talk about.
it's endless, basically, that's what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say, so all right, well, thank you, Brian, and thank you, everybody, and we will see you soon. Bye
Thank
now.
you, Martha. Bye, everyone.
Yeah.